HS people, this is my round 5 game against Leonard McLaren, FIDE Master, from the 43rd Trust Open in Auckland, New Zealand. I was white and this was semi-preparation from about 4 weeks ago. So e4, c5, knight f3, and now the funny move, a6. The two best moves for white in this position, to my knowledge, is either pawn to c3 or pawn to c4. Now, if you play c3, it can become an Hedgehog Sicilian type of position. I opted for c4. The main idea of a6 is that if you go d4, takes, knight f6 attacking the pawn, white defends the pawn, and then e5. And in the Hedgehog Sicilian, where the knight's already on c6 and the pawn's on a7, the best move is knight b5, jumping into this weakened d6 square because no black pawn can attack it. However, in this position, my knight cannot go to b5. It has to go to b3 or one of these squares. But most of them will be answered with bishop b4, and black has a very easy play because this is what he does in the Hedgehog with knight c6 if knight b3 or knight f3. And if knight f5 in the Hedgehog with the knight on c6, then d5 is the best move, and white can sometimes take it, bishop takes, and then take the knight on c6. But that's not the case here, so the knight's just getting undermined. So it's kind of an opening trap to get a favorable Hedgehog. So d4 is probably a mistake. c4, and now d6. So one advantage that black can have with this type of move order is to go after this weakened d4 square with knight c6, and then after d4 takes, e5. Now I'm not going to take this and improve black's center, I'm going to drop back, but then they can play like bishop c5, and they're securing this dark square here. It's true I'm going to get d5, but Bobby Fischer said you got to give squares to get squares. Now I feel like white should have a little bit of an easier position to play because he does have 3 versus 2 pawns on the queen side, so he has a pawn majority, but it can be very difficult to prove. Okay, so d6 happened and then continued. So obviously knight f6 is the main move, attacking the pawn, creating a direct threat, but e6 is okay. So we get to this position. I think bishop e2, it's not a bad move, but in my preparation from 4 weeks ago, there were some lines where white wants to play g4, g5, attacking a knight on f6, and if the queen's on c7, there were lines with knight d5 sacrificing a piece positionally, and if the pawn didn't take the knight and the queen decided to drop back in those lines, sometimes this bishop would need to go to h3 to threaten to take on e6. So it's quite a deep idea, but I feel like the bishop's misplaced on e2 in some lines. So that's why I think it's more accurate to play bishop e3 first and saying to black, well, what setup are you going to choose before I commit my bishop to either e2 or h3 in those g4, h4 lines. So, it's not a bad move, but it's kind of a bit committal for my liking. So queen c7. So this is just a mainline hedgehog now, but the only difference from the mainline hedgehog is if the pawn was still on d7 and black played an early knight f6, there's some lines where I have to play a3. So if we just go back to the start and play a standard hedgehog with the main move order, like this, c4, knight f6. So bishop b4 is of course a move here, but queen c7 is the main move, a main move. And then a3 is the move to stop bishop b4. And you basically get the same hedgehog position, except white has played this a3 move, so black has an extra tempo. However, because of black's move order in this game, I have managed to avoid playing a3. Which means my preparation from 4 weeks ago with a3 is even better because I basically just have an extra tempo. So the computer will tell you that g4 is the best move here, and it probably is, but I decided to go with my prep, and it looks insane to move the king like this, but you got to understand the general chess principle that whenever kings castle on opposite sides of the board, what matters is who is faster in the race of attacks. So black is not going to castle queenside because he's made a lot of pawn weaknesses, and whenever you push pawns, you leave squares behind. So it's a bit too airy, a bit too open. So it's probably logical for black to castle kingside, and I want to attack on the kingside. But if I'm castling kingside as well, I don't want to create that air around my king. So I'm going to tuck my king away safely so that I can win the race when the king castles on the kingside. And plus this is actually very principled because I do have a space advantage here. So king d2. And the computer loves this plan for white. It was actually shown to me by my friend from Germany, Grandmaster Roland Schmaltz. So quite a nice idea. The castles, and I believe that this is already very close to winning for white because white is just too fast in this race. And I did computer check this position. It gives me something like +2 already. So, you know, black needs to do something against the white king here. So he's attacking the pawn. I'm defending the pawn. And I'm not really attacking this b6 pawn because his bishop takes pawn check. And then he has queen takes queen. And I would lose. I think there was a funny line I saw in the game with... I'm just trying to remember, hang on. I think it was knight d7, h5, knight c5 attacking my queen, queen takes b6, no, this doesn't work. There was a line where I sack the queen and I get 3 pieces for it, but it doesn't look obvious. I don't remember, sorry. So knight e5 attacking the pawn, queen b3, knight c7, king a1, knight back to d7, h5. So I'm just winning this race, and now I thought he should go knight c5. I move the queen, b5, and I wasn't actually going to take on b5. I was just going to continue the race, and then if b4, put my knight on b1, and basically asking white how is he getting through. Asking black, sorry. Okay, so d5, I take away from the center, which is a bit unusual, but if I take towards the center, I don't necessarily want to open up the c file. This position. I don't know, I can't really explain it. I just intuitively felt like e takes was better. Knight f5, bishop f8, g6. Computer says white's already completely winning here. Pawn takes, bishop takes. I'm hitting f7. The line I tried to calculate in the game was knight c5 doesn't work because a queen takes b6. It wasn't that. It was knight e5, pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, knight takes, rook over here. So the idea is to play rook takes g6 and then push this pawn to open to the king. Knight takes d5, knight takes, queen e5, attacking both of the knights. And I wanted something fancy with like rook takes g6 to work. You can't play pawn takes because of it's just checkmate in one move because it's double check. And my idea in this position is to play queen a3. But it never works because you can just take on a3 and the queen's actually protecting the g7 square, so I can't go rook takes g7. But I wanted something like queen a3 to work. Sorry, take on d5. Queen a3. You can't take the queen because of rook g7 and then checkmate. If you just do a nothing move, the threat is queen takes f8, If rook takes, then knight e7 is checkmate, or rook takes g7. If king takes, then rook h8 is checkmate. So this was a concept, but it just doesn't work because he just takes on f5. So I could never make this cool idea work. I've actually seen this concept in checkmate puzzles before with a bishop on f8 and a queen taking the bishop like this. So that's why I was trying to make the pattern work, but it doesn't actually work. But I think rook takes g6 may not be the best move. I think knight h6 instead, and then rook takes g6. So if you take knight e7 double check, so the threat is queen g8 checkmate, so you've got to start running out this way. Bishop takes h6, knight g8, and then just queen f7, and you've got to block the queen and then take as mate. So there's that idea, and if bishop g7 instead, there's knight f6, take on h6, and then this checkmate as well. Take here, checkmate. So this concept of knight takes d5 just doesn't work. Anyway, back in the game he played pawn takes c4, bishop takes, bishop f3, h6. So now the threat is to take on g7 and go rook takes h7, h7 checkmate. So the knight goes to f6. I play bishop d4, so the threat is to take. Actually, this is what happened in the game. Queen b7 takes, bishop takes g7 checkmate. So that's, he resigned after rook takes h7. But what I'd actually seen in the game was knight e8 to defend the g7 square. Take on g7. You have to play bishop takes to defend the f6 knight. Because if knight takes, I just take on f6 and then just mate here. So bishop takes, queen e6, and there's actually no decent way for black to stop queen takes knight check here. If queen b7 to attack this rook, you play queen takes knight anyway. Knight takes is impossible because of checkmate, so you must play rook takes. And then it's the same checkmate in the game, except I get to sacrifice my queen, which I think is very beautiful. Yeah, so game actually ended with queen b7, take on h7, rook h7, take on g7, rook h7, and he resigned. And I'm very happy with this game. I submitted it for the Brilliancy prize, so we can wait and see. But this king d2 idea is something to keep in mind in the Hedgehog. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to make some more videos in the future. Thanks, guys.